Hey guys. All right. So, um, we've got 3 more weeks class, then a week, then finals week. So we're fast approaching the end of this semester here. It's going to be over in no time. Regarding the test that you took last Thursday, you've all seen your grades. Hopefully by this point, if not, go in and look at that. If you did poorly on the exam, Um, could have been one, either you didn't know the answers to the questions, or two, the essay hit some people hard. And for future purposes, for the final, I tried to head off people doing poorly on this test with the essay question by giving more specific instructions, giving you the sense that an essay is supposed to be an essay. It's not supposed to be like a one paragraph blog post or something. So that's why I stressed with this one: introduction, body, conclusion. Um, so if you did poorly again, call me if you want specifics on your test. That do an office appointment with me, so to speak, virtual office appointment. But chances are you didn't give me a developed essay. You gave me like one paragraph, or I noticed a lot of you that didn't do as well on the essay question. It said make specific reference to the literature, and maybe you didn't refer to the literature that we studied at all. Like specific means names of characters, quotes from passages, things like that. And so, something to think about for the next test. But again, if you've got questions, um, let's set up a virtual office meeting. All right. Um, Moving on to this week, we're looking at the three kingdoms, right? The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the famous classical Chinese work. If you look back through the PowerPoints, the power um, when we talked about Confucius and Sun Tzu, I also have some notes in there on the Three Kingdoms period. Specifically, the readings that we're doing focus around Redcliffe. If some of you happen to watch that and do the extra credit, that should help you with the reading that we're doing this week, with understanding it better. I wanted to go over a little bit. So based off of the questions that I gave you to help guide your reading, I wanted to just go over some of the material here. So this Three Kingdoms thing, right? It starts out with a rebellion of the yellow scarves. They wear yellow scarves around their necks, and then you have these three guys that band up together, and their names are, for those who are their names are Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei. That was on page 371, right? So they meet up at the beginning, and they didn't know each other before, but they kind of stumble across each other's paths. They see a notice on a door that the government is saying, there's a rebellion, and they're asking people to help join the army. And so these three guys who become like great Chinese heroes, um, they decide to go in on this fight, right? And to join and fight on the side of the government against the Yellow Scarves. Now, interestingly enough, Liu Bei, this character, he's huge in Chinese pop culture. Um, oh wait, we'll come back to him. Okay, well, we'll come back to Liu Bei. So these three men, they get together, they talk, and it kind of strikes me as a bit ironic that the three men get together and they come up with this plan to strive for tranquility. And it's like, so striving for tranquility involves going out for a peace march, right? No, striving for tranquility is code for go out and kill a bunch of the enemy, right? It's kind of like in the Mahabharata, how do the gods create tranquility, peace in the universe? They come down and they instigate this huge war where the two groups of cousins kill each other off, right? So it just there's feels like a lot of irony there. I found it interesting in this reading here. I don't know if you commented today as you were sharing your reflective writings and commenting on them with each other, but it's interesting that weapons have names in this culture, right? So you have the green dragon saber, the serpent halberd that are brought up, and so I don't know that we've come across that in any culture's literatures yet. Um, Certainly you have that in European culture. You have for example, Excalibur is King Arthur's sword, and if you read like the Lord of the Rings, really the Lord of the Rings just picks up all these ancient European traditions, and Gandalf. Bilbo's sword is called Sting, right? And Gandalf's sword has a name. All the weapons have names, and so in this story, maybe for the first time that we've come across in this course, they name their weapons. And then you have this guy come in, Chow Chow, right? And Chow Chow, he's just got an interesting description there, and it talks about him and his uncle, and how his uncle is kind of like doesn't think much of him, right, and constantly rats him out to his dad until Chow Chow finds a way to turn the tables on his uncle, right? Chow Chow becomes a major figure here, right? And he's kind of the conniving, tricky one. As you read about Chow Chow, go through our three readings here. Particularly think about how does Chow Chow fit into like Sun Tzu's Art of War? How does he measure up to or not measure up to the ideas there, and other characters too in the battle strategies? Which characters are more or less like Sun Tzu? What events, what strategies sound like something Sun Tzu would have come up with? And is there anything that sounds more like what Confucius would have come up with? So go back, maybe, and even read some more of this of Sun Tzu's stuff in the Art of War. Um, and think about it as you're reading through the Three Kingdoms and reading about the strategies they use with each other and the jockeying for position with each other. You also have this feeling, which I'm not sure has come into other literature we've read so far, where Liu Bei, who is one of the Southern Kings and one of the three men, right, that we mentioned, Liu Bei, he is kind of hampered throughout a lot of this story because he's trying to protect who? He's trying to protect his people, right? And so his people are all refugees, running before the warlord. And Liu Bei, he's the king, he's the warlord, but he can't just go out and fight Cao Cao. He's got to protect his people. And so you have this sense this isn't a bunch of guys out there just fighting. It's no, the common people need protecting. And Liu Bei, as a good ruler, is in danger throughout the whole thing because he's slowed down and he's having to think not just about battle tactics and stuff, but he's having to think about how does he protect his men? How does he protect his people, right? And so maybe it's particularly relevant today, right? Just this sense that war is not just about people getting out there with their guns and knives, and it's about it affects common people, right? It creates refugee crises, so to speak, like what we've got here in the Three Kingdoms. You've got the interesting case of Zhao Zilong, who Zhang Fei ends up becoming convinced is like a traitor, and Liu Bei's like, no, he would never betray me. So Zhang Fei even goes out and positions himself on a bridge with his men, waiting for Zhao Zilong to come along so that he can kill him because he thinks he's a traitor. When in fact, not. Zhao Zilong was just hampered by the enemy and couldn't help out when he was needed. But then he goes and puts his neck on the line to try and rescue Liu Bei's infant son, right? And so you've got but then you've got the sense too of Chow Chow also becomes convinced at different points that certain people have betrayed or are betraying him. And what is his reaction? I mean, Liu Bei is like, let's be careful. Let's don't just fly off the handle and accuse somebody of being a traitor. How do we know this person is a traitor? We need to check this out first. And how does Chow Chow relate to perceived treachery? So interesting difference in their two characters. Look for specific examples regarding Chow Chow as you read that too, as you read this work. There's an interesting moment when Zhao Zilong is rescuing the baby, and something happens like this flash of light. This crater opens up in front of him, knocks his enemy down. Divine intervention, right? And my question is, I mean, in the Mahabharata, divine intervention feels like something that just constantly happens, right? In the Three Kingdoms, not so much. So something to think about. Does it have a place in the Three Kingdoms? Do you feel like the divine intervention is something that's just kind of gets in the way, or does it fit? Does it belong in this story the way that it fits and belongs, obviously, in the Mahabharata? Of course, you have an interesting moment too with Zhao Zilong where, he's being chased around and Chow Chow sees him from a distance, and Chow Chow, bloodthirsty dude as he is like, that guy's pretty impressive. He's watching Zhao Zilong and he tells his men, he's like, I don't want him killed. I want you to take him alive. Don't kill him because I admire him. His skill as a warrior, even though he's the enemy. So Chow Chow, bloodthirsty as he is, has his moments. He respects skill. He respects great warriors. Um, Liu Bei has an interesting reaction when Zhao Zilong finally brings his baby back to him. It says he throws the baby down, and I'm like, is that literal? What do you think, or not? And uh, because he's like, I can't believe my greatest warrior risked his life for a baby, even though it's his baby, it's Liu Bei's baby. Kind of reminds me of this scene in First Samuel where King David, the Israelite, the Hebrew King David, he makes an offhanded remark to three of his great warriors that he's so thirsty. He's like, I wish I had some water from this spring, this well that's in the enemy camp. So his three great warriors, without him knowing it, fight their way into the center of the enemy camp and draw the water from the well, and they bring it back to David. And when they get the water back to him, he pours it out on the ground, and he's like, I can't drink this water. Drinking this water would make it seem like it would be like saying that I care about a drink of water more than I care about my three greatest warriors. And really, I'm upset that you guys wouldn't have risked your lives just to bring me a little water. So it was just an interesting comparison in my mind between the two scenes. You have this interesting battle of wits between Zhang Fei and Cao Cao on the bridge as Cao Cao approaches the bridge, and they're back and forth in how Zhang Fei tries to trick Cao Cao, but yet in the end, Zhang Fei gives himself away so that Cao Cao realizes what is going on, and Zhang Fei's plan backfires. So make sure you read carefully in there and understand what goes on with that. Um, and then there's another interesting moment where, and at the end of this work, Zhuge Liang he heads down the river, right? At the end of our first reading, Zhuge Liang, who is like this super smart advisor of Liu Bei's, heads down the river to go and try and convince some of the southern kings to help support Liu Bei in fighting Cao Cao. So like Cao Cao is kind of the renegade 5-star general, um, who has got the emperor under his thumb, and Cao Cao's on a rampage trying to take over stuff. If you notice, the three heroes we were talking about at the beginning, they're with the government, but something happens which turns them against the government. So in the first few pages, it looks like they're fighting with the government on Cao Cao's side, but then make sure you catch that. That there's a point where they get ticked about something, and then they decide to switch over and join the Yellow Scars and join the rebellion against Cao Cao. Yeah, basically, because Cao Cao's kind of taken over the role of emperor because the emperor's a wuss, you know. Yeah. Okay. One other thing I wanted to mention was you've got this character. Uh, you've got this character Guan Yu, Guanyu, um, who he's just an interesting figure because he I'm just looking for where this passage comes up. Guan Yu is this fierce, guy who doesn't keep up his hair real well, until he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed every morning. And if you go into pretty much any Chinese restaurant, you will see a statue of this guy. And so, hey, it's just an interesting cultural thing. Even today, you'll see statues of Guan Yu when you go into Chinese restaurants. Okay, so that's kind of some comments on the Three Kingdoms reading, the first one that we had for today. I want to switch topics now, and we're not really going to have, technically World Lit 1 kind of wraps up with William Shakespeare, and we don't really have time to address Shakespeare, which is, the way that the semester has worked out. And so I'm kind of just trying to pick a few key passages from Shakespeare and do some mini lectures. Because clearly, he's the greatest writer in the English language, and that puts him high in world literature. And so, and as I said, T.S. Eliot even famously said that between Dante and Shakespeare, they divide the world between them, and there isn't a third, And so, basically, we already, if you didn't watch that mini lecture on the Shakespearean sonnet, where he's comparing his his love to the summer and how she comes off better. Make sure you go back and watch that. But as we go through these next few weeks, I'm just going to pick out some Shakespeare passages and go over them. And this will be fodder for tests. So make sure and go back and read these passages in connection with my little lectures, discussions, and think about them. So, breaking out the Oxford Anthology of Shakespeare again, just some key passages in here. And again, I figured most of you have probably read a play or two by Shakespeare in high school, and so I was like, I didn't necessarily want to do a play in this class. I was more like, let's just look at some key passages, some famous passages. So this one is called "The Ages of Man." That's what they title it in this anthology. It says, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, then the whining schoolboy with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like Snell unwillingly to school, and then the lover sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, his youthful hose well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness in mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything." That's from the play As You Like It. Just a quick explication of this poem. So basically, it says that the world is a stage and we're all just actors on it, right? And we all come in and we leave, we enter and then we're done, right? We're out of the picture. And he says, there are 7 stages to each person's life. At first, and particularly he says to each man's life, at first there's the infant, puking in the nurse's arms, mewling like a little kitten and puking, right? Then there's the schoolboy with his backpack on, his satchel, creeping like a snail to school because he doesn't want to go. But with his face freshly scrubbed and washed by his mother or his nurse. Then there's romance. There's young love, sighing like hot furnaces for each other, right? The heat of love. Writing sad love songs for one another. Picking out parts of the girl's body, like her eyebrow, and writing a song about her eyebrow. Then after that stage comes the stage of the soldier, the warrior, and of course not everybody becomes a soldier, so maybe this is a metaphor for whatever you do with your life, whatever you take up to do with your life, whatever cause, whatever you care about. The soldier with making strange oaths, promising on his honor to do whatever, right? And bearded like a leopard, bearded like the pard, like a leopard, it's like the fierceness of the guy. He's jealous, he's quick, he's quick to fight, he's seeking honor, even, and he's seeking reputation, seeking to build his reputation in the world, even if it means charging into the face of a cannon, right? And then he gets a little bit older and gets established in life. His belly gets kind of fat. His belly is lined with good capon, I think that's like chicken, right? So he's eating well, a little too well, getting fat, you know. He's got all sorts of wise sayings he likes to say to younger people, right? Wise saws. Saws is like a saying, kind of like a boring saying, like, please stop sawing away, telling me this stuff, right? Um, and he plays his part. You play your part on the stage, right? The sixth stage comes along. It's middle age, right? Um, Kind of wearing house clothes around the house. You're wearing glasses on your nose now. I'm wearing glasses, you know. Is 41 middle age? I guess so. I guess it's getting there. It's kind of at the early stage of middle age, right? Um, and then as you get a little bit older, your youthful hose. You know, back then men wore pantyhose, right? Um, I've heard it was because people didn't take baths very often, and so the reason men and women both wore hose is because they would actually stick perfume and stuff down in between their hose and their legs so they didn't smell that bad. But it says as he gets older, you know, his hose, when he was younger, it fit really well. Now that his thighs are shrinking from old age, it's kind of baggy on him. You know, his shrunk shanks, his shrunk thighs don't look as good in his pantyhose anymore. And his big manly voice he used to have is now kind of squeaky. He's starting to sound like a little kid again, right? Um, and then the last scene is second childishness. You're back to being a child. You know, your memory goes. You don't. You know, you talk illogically and stuff, and so like you become a child again. And finally, it's oblivion. Just your mind's gone, right? And your teeth fall out your eyes. Your vision, your sight goes. You can't taste stuff well anymore, and everything just goes, right? So that's the sans teeth, sans eyes, sans meaning minus this, minus that. Everything leaves you, right? And so again, this poem is just about the stages of man. Um, and so, yeah. So for your 4 hour Thursday, um, for our Thursday meeting, some of you ladies, if you wanted to, you could even as part of your uh, as part of the discussion. Well, how should I put this? Well, yeah, you could think about, and we'll talk about this a little on Thursday. You know, um, what do you think of this passage? Like, what might a woman's ages of man look like if this was told from the perspective of a woman? What might that look like as to the stages of life? Um, and that too, just be ready to talk about. Also, does this in any way parallel the Joseph Campbell's hero's journey? So that's another thing to think about regarding this passage, and this may even show up on the next test. Like, does this in any way parallel the hero's journey? So I will include a link in the class PowerPoint, which I'll update a link for the poem um, that I just read, and I'll just keep a running thing where I put the links for different Shakespeare passages that we look on, where I put them on that Shakespeare slide that's in the class PowerPoint, and you can go back and look at those poems and listen to these short lectures on, again, just some different Shakespeare passages, because I feel like, you know, you could spend a lot of time reading individual plays by Shakespeare, and it's good to read a whole play, to like get beginning to end the meat of a play. I feel like you guys have already gotten a couple of those probably in high school. And so I'm just going to be going through the next 3 weeks and picking out some key passages that I'm like, this is important Shakespeare to know if you're going to know anything, if you're going to be able to recognize, oh yes, I know what that is, you know, and be able to discuss it with others. All right, talk to you later.